welcome J.C. Watts.
Mr. Pryor, thank you very much for your kind introduction, and I am tickled to be with you this afternoon, be on the campus at the University of Central Oklahoma, and to be in the George Nye building again. And I'm thrilled that NextGen and the University of Central Oklahoma were think enough of me to extend an invitation for me to come and to be with you this afternoon and share some of my thoughts and life's experiences with you concerning diversity and inclusion. I've had a pretty eventful 63 years of living, soon to be 64 next month. And by the way, that afro that you saw, Dick, on the screen, I've got it at home in the closet. I've had some pretty interesting experiences over the last 63 years and 11 months of my life. And I hear about 15 years ago, ventured out to create an African American news network. And 15 years it took me to get that network launched, and 2 years ago, February 10th, this past February 10th, 2 years ago, we launched the Black News Channel. And folks have asked, and throughout that time of formation, people ask me, why an African American news channel? Well, I think every community needs a platform to tell their story, talk about their history, talk about how current affairs impacts them, and talk about their culture, and that's what we've tried to do. I think one simple illustration that I've used over the last 15 years to emphasize why the importance of a Black news channel is because I've been involved in sickle cell here in the state of Oklahoma. My family is impacted by sickle cell. I called a major foundation here in the state of Oklahoma about 3 years ago and asked them to sponsor me in a 5K run. They had no idea what sickle cell was. They were gracious enough to sponsor me, but they had no idea what it was. You don't hear networks like CNN and MSNBC or Fox News talking about sickle cell, because that's an issue, that's a disease that impacts probably 95% of the cases, 97% of the sickle cell cases in America. They impact the African American community. So we talk about those things. We want to talk about those things. So that's just a simple illustration of why I thought it was important for us to have a black news channel. I also was pretty proud to be involved with John Lewis in creating the African American Museum of History and Culture in Washington, D.C. And it's one of the hottest tickets in Washington. When you're there, if you ever get a chance, hope you'll get a chance to stop by and see that and visit the museum. I didn't learn about Black history at Eufaula High School in my public school training. I learned about African American history mainly on my own through Ebony and Jet magazine that my sister would bring down from Tulsa to Eufaula, and she'd bring those old Ebony and Jet magazines to Eufaula, and I would peel the pages of those magazines, Dick, and I'd see Black men in coat and ties, and I grew up seeing Black men going to work in overalls every day or blue jeans. And even in COVID, I continue to wear a coat and tie because it took me 20 years to get out of overalls. I like wearing a coat and tie. I don't want to wear overalls anymore. But my connection to the African American community, to the greater African American community, was through Ebony and Jet, and that's where I learned a lot of Black history. And I ended up serving in Congress with men who I had seen in those magazines, women I had seen in those magazines, and was able to pick their brain about marches with Reverend King and talking about the civil rights movement and going to lunch and dinner with those guys, those men and women talking about those things. And it was quite a fascinating 8 years that I spent in Congress, because I got exposed to many of those people who were on the front end of the civil rights movement. And that story needed to be told. And so we took us 7-8 years to get it done. But nevertheless, today you can go to Washington and you can see the African American Museum of History and Culture and get a greater picture, get a greater understanding of the African American community and the contribution that we have made in the United States of America. History isn't there for us to like or dislike. It is there to learn from it, and if it offends you, or if it offends me, even better, because then you or I are less likely to repeat it. It's not yours to erase. It belongs to all of us. And it is interesting how culture impacts different communities. And I've always interested in understanding the culture of people that look different than me, and people that grew up on the other side of the railroad tracks than me in Eufaula, Oklahoma. And I had a chance, because of athletics. Athletics was good in teaching me about other people's cultures and about their norms and the different idiosyncrasies that we find in different cultures. I believe in inclusion, and I believe in diversity for the sake of opportunity. My philosophy has always been, in spite of what the inequities might have been, my philosophy has always been, just give me a chance. It doesn't even have to be a fair chance. Just give me a chance. Just allow me the opportunity to make a contribution. I've been in the social discussion most of my life, because of the positions that I've held, the things that I have done over the last 53 years of my life. I've gone through the discussion about the black quarterback. I heard the discussion being held because I was a black quarterback. I've gone through the discussion about whether or not we should have female sports reporters, because I was in the space when that discussion was being had. I've been in the discussions about whether or not you can be black or be Republican. I've been in the discussion about corporate boards, because I've served on corporate boards and I've been on boards, and I remember there was a time that you didn't see many people that looked like me that served on corporate boards. I served on the board of an 80-year-old company that I'm the second African-American board member. The first was John Johnson, the guy whose magazines I read, Ebony and Jet, to get a greater picture of the larger African-American community. But I've often thought, and I've often asked the question, who are the people that makes the rules that says you can't be black and be Republican? Who are the people that makes the rules that says you can't be a female and be a sports reporter? Who are the people that makes the rules that says that you can't be an African American and be on the board of a public company? John Johnson created a great example in terms of business and how it should be done and how businesses should be run. John Deere started in 1837. In 2004, I became the first African American to own a John Deere dealership. I was one of two kids to integrate Eufaula Public Schools. In the second grade, I and a fellow by the name of Howard Etheridge, we integrated Jefferson Davis Elementary School. The fellow who served as the president of the Confederacy. I was the first black quarterback of my high school football team. I was also the student body president of that same high school. And I never did or sought to be on any corporate board. I never sought to be the first African American nominee of either major political office for statewide office in the state of Oklahoma. I never sought to be the first African American John Deere dealer in the United States. I never sought to be the first or second in anything that I did. But nevertheless, I understood the obligation of being the first or being the second. I've seen my uncle, who served for 17, 18 years as a state president of the NAACP here in the state of Oklahoma. I saw him lead the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan in the state of Oklahoma to a personal relationship with Christ. And they traveled around the country talking about this, even had an appearance on the Donahue Show to talk about their relationship. So in all of my doings and all of my obligations, because of that, I also understood the importance of healing the culture, in spite of what that culture might be or in spite of what it might stand for. I'm well aware of slavery in America and the history of slavery in America. I've read about it. I've studied it. I've been curious about many things surrounding slavery, and I've pursued the answers. I've visited Monticello in Charlottesville, Virginia, the home of the third president of the United States, and I saw the bunkers and I saw the houses where slaves who were owned by the third president, where they were housed. I touched the buildings. I touched the beds. I am the heir of rape, rope, fire, and murder. I'm not angry about that, and I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not ashamed that my great-grandfather was a slave. But I am ashamed that there were human beings that were so inhumane to other human beings. I visited Accra, Ghana, and saw the huts where Africans were housed before they walked down a runway through about a 6-foot rectangular door to get on a slave ship to cross the Atlantic to the United States of America. This door, this rectangular door that I mentioned, they called it the Farewell to Africa door, or the door of no return, because they knew when they walked through that door, never again, after they got on that ship, would they ever see their homeland. The institution of slavery put a stigma on Black Americans that in some quarters still exist to this day. While my faith teaches me that I am no better than anyone else, it also has taught me not to be afraid to be different than others, and not be afraid to ask the difficult questions. Being intellectually curious, and I've asked, again, who makes the rules that says that we can't? And why can't you be a Black quarterback? Why can't you be a Black Republican? Why can't you be a female sports reporter? Why can't you be Black and own a publicly traded company? And by the way, today in all the thousands of publicly traded companies that we have in America, less than 10 are owned by African Americans. Why? I had something happen to me back when I was a sophomore in high school. The superintendent for the Corps Engineers in Porham, Oklahoma, about 20 miles from my home, the superintendent of the Corps Engineers made a conscious decision to cross the railroad tracks, and in most rural communities, the railroad tracks are the things, that's the demarcation between the Black community and the white community. And the superintendent of the Corps Engineers made a conscious decision to venture across the railroad tracks in Eufaula, Oklahoma, stop in front of my house, turn his engine off, take off his baseball cap, put on his cowboy hat, walk up to me where I was mowing our lawn. I turned the motor off, and he said, "I am Robert Carroll," and I talked about this in my book. He said, "My name is Robert Carroll. I'm the superintendent for the Corps Engineers, and this summer we're going to hire some kids for internships for the Corps. We pay $2.10 an hour, and I want to hire 2 black kids." Didn't take me long to think through that process. I'm mowing the lawns for room and board for my dad. I get no spending money from him. If I take this job, I understand I'll still have to mow the lawn, but I'm going to get $2.10 an hour to work at the Corps Engineers. I said, "Sir, I'm one of those black kids. I'll get one of my buddies." My buddy and I, Bruce Perkins, we got summer jobs at the Corps Engineer. And you say, "JC, why is that a big deal?" Because in Eufaula, I didn't see people that looked like me that worked in banks. I didn't see people that looked like me that worked in the county, the courthouse and the municipal offices. And Eufaula was the county seat, or is the county seat of McIntosh County. You just didn't see people that looked like me on the other side of the railroad tracks. And this guy made a conscious decision. He was intentional about coming across the railroad tracks and giving 2 black kids, me being one of them, an opportunity. I don't find it necessarily racist if a white CEO has 100 employees and none of them, or very few of them, look like me. However, if I am the CEO of a company that has 100 employees, they all may not be or look like me or be black, but I promise you I will probably have more than the white CEO. And again, I don't necessarily see that as racist, because usually how do we hire? We usually hire from our social circles. We usually hire from the people that we know. The reason you would probably see more African Americans in my base of 100 employees is because I go to church with black people. I socialize with black people. I know black legislators. I have black friends. I know the black chamber. I go to black churches and I preach and I speak. I know black pastors. And so when I lose an executive assistant, if I'm with one of my black friends and I say, "Man, my executive assistant has been with me for the last 7 years. He or she, they're retiring or they went to another job, and I'm going to need to hire a new executive assistant." You know what they'll say? They'll say, "Hey, my sister-in-law, she's been out of work for 2 months. She's an executive assistant." I say, "Send me her resume." A lot of times that's how it happens. And because I socialize with people that I know, my circle is usually broader than most of the white CEOs that I would know when it comes to hiring African Americans. When I ran for public office, I tried to figure out who did I not want to vote for me. And I couldn't figure out anybody. I wanted white people and black people and red and yellow and brown people. I wanted people of all colors voting for me. I wanted young and old, men and women. I wanted everybody to vote for me. Made me no difference. We've been in the barbecue business in Eufaula, my family has, for the last 50 years in some form or fashion. We sold barbecue to white people, to black people, to yellow, red, and brown people within 50 miles of our barbecue restaurant. We were intentional. We were intentional. When I was in high school, I played basketball. Didn't make every shot that I took. My teammates would gladly tell you I wasn't afraid to shoot. I've not made every basket that I've shot. And one of my mottos in life has been shoot the ball. Don't be afraid to shoot. Don't be afraid to prepare yourself to take the shot mentally and physically. And in life, I have worked very hard to make it difficult for people to say, JC, I would have, but. I would have hired you, but. I would have given you the job, but. You would have won the election, but. You would have won the football game, but. We would have invited you on our board, but. Make it extremely difficult for people to say, but. In closing, Mahatma Gandhi said this: we all like change, but we don't like change. We all, there's an old saying in faith circles that says, you know, we all want to go to heaven, but we don't want to die. Well, Mahatma Gandhi said this: you must be the change you wish to see in the world. A good first step in change, in the change that we want to see, is being intentional. Being intentional. Intentionally serving, intentionally giving, intentionally forgiving, intentionally getting outside of our comfort zone, intentionally getting outside of our social circles, for the sake of opportunity for everybody. Thank you all very much for letting me come.